on behalf of myself, Nigel Moulton, I'd like to welcome everybody to this Amdaris webinar entitled Mind, Body and Data, How to Drive Innovation Through Digital Fitness. I'm joined by my co-presenters this morning, Dominic and Mihai, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves when they start speaking. But just to make sure that everybody's in the right place, this is a webinar designed to take a look at particularly how organizations, regardless of their size or scale actually, are looking to adopt new technology, bring it into their organization. And this has a particular focus this morning on generative AI, which we'll hear about during the course of the presentation itself. Now, the webinar has a couple of features in it. First of all, there is actually a Q&A window that you should be able to see on the right-hand side of your control panel. When myself and Dominic and Mihai are speaking, if there's anything that sparks any interest, any questions that you want perhaps answering in some more detail, please use the question and answer window on the right-hand side. We have absolutely allowed some time at the end of this webinar to go through that. And myself, Dominic, and Mihai will be able to address any of your questions live. There's also a copy of the material, so the material that we are going to be using this morning. Those of you that have attended and have provided email addresses, we're going to be sending you a sort of a PDF version of that. So again, the content that we make available during the course of this presentation is something you'll be able to take away with you, share with your colleagues, but again, it will be in PDF format. So let's actually sort of take a look at our formal agenda. So let's move on to the next slide, please. So the content follows this sort of format. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm a fractional CTO. I work for an agency called Freeman Clark. And what we do is we are effectively gun for hire, if you will, CIOs and CTOs who help organizations, regardless of their size, sort of with IT strategy, IT development, and we work independently. And we work, in many cases, we've come from large organizations. Myself, I was ex-Dell, but we now work, as I said, independently in a number of organizations across the UK, helping organizations get their IT strategy and their IT organization in better shape than when it is when we initially start the work that we do with people. And what I'm going to do in the sort of first 5 or 10 minutes is just set the scene in terms of thinking about how technologies like AI and generative AI have been adopted and some of the differences that I see when I look into the market right now. To sort of build on that, I'm then going to hand to Mihai, and Mihai will walk us through the principles of digital fitness, why you should do it, how you should think about it. And then we're going to hand over to Dominic, who's actually taken some of the theory that we're going to discuss in the sort of first 20, 30 minutes and actually show in practice how Robert Walters, the company that he represents, actually was engaged with Amdaris to deliver some quite compelling results in their organization. And at the end, as I said, a chance for us to do some Q&A. There's a couple of pop-ups that are going to come at appropriate points in the presentation. There's going to be a feedback form right at the very end. And we would all love your feedback. If this has been useful, if there's points that we've raised that you'd like to learn more about, perfect opportunity at the end of this conference to actually sort of fill out that feedback form and give feedback directly to myself, Mihai, and Dominic. So let's get into this and kick this off. Now, to start with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow some work from a gentleman called Geoffrey Moore, and he wrote a very compelling book called Crossing the Chasm. Many of you might have read it. And in that book, he shows the theory of how technology is adopted across its life cycle. And this is a sort of a general rule, but if we think about this and we think about technologies that we are actually using ourselves today, I'm going to use cloud computing as an example, because cloud computing has been around about 10, 11 years now. And it absolutely went through these phases. When AWS and the hyperscalers started to announce their services, there were a number of you who would have innovated in that space. But in terms of the overall market share and market adoption, it was relatively low. But technologies that are successful gain momentum. They move into an early adoption phase, and then they move into what we call the early majority phase. And if you advance the slide, when this happens, the market hits something called its tornado phase. And when markets are in their tornado phases, they exhibit a number of very interesting attributes. One, the numbers of players in that industry typically consolidates. And if you think about it today, UK and Western Europe and the US, we broadly have 3 hyperscalers. So you might remember that Cisco launched the hyperscale platform. VMware launched the hyperscale platform. They're no longer here, right? The market has consolidated around 3. Secondly, those hyperscalers in the tornado phase are typically growing at triple digits every year. Their businesses are doubling in size. So it's always very interesting when a market hits its tornado phase because it becomes unstoppable. And if you look at it, and you think about your own experiences with cloud and hyperscale cloud, roughly half of the market is available before those players who are later to it and perhaps historically the laggards actually adopt these innovations and these technology changes. But as I said, cloud's been around for 10 years. It's taken us 10 years to get to this point. So whilst these innovations might seem radical and different, actually their adoption is in some cases a much longer life cycle than people initially expect. And secondly, there are absolutely market indicators that tell us where the adoption is in terms of its life cycle. So let's apply that theory to generative AI. Now, I've been around a while. I've seen a few of these technologies come and go, and I've seen a few not make it, okay? Everybody remember Google Glass? Never crossed the chasm, never made it to its tornado phase because the technology was never broadly adopted. What's interesting with AI, and particularly generative AI, and if you hit the advance for me, I've never seen an adoption like this. Everybody, everywhere is trying to find a way of adopting these techniques and these technologies into their organizations. They might be classically technology laggards, but they are scrambling to figure out how AI and generative AI in particular can be implemented in their businesses, because the fear of not doing it is actually gotten to the point where, regardless of where you are in a technology life cycle, everybody is adopting this. Now, this brings with it a set of challenges, because not every organization is in shape. They can't cope with the pressures and the demands that investing in a technology like this will bring to them. They're basically not fit enough. So to talk us through how you get digitally fit, how you get your organization in shape to be able to take on a highly disruptive technology like this, let me now hand over to Mihai, who'll walk us through the Amdaris story as to how they implemented and are thinking about AI with regards to their customers. So Mihai, over to you.
Thank you, Nigel. So I'm Mihai Cernei, CTO at Amdaris, and I am responsible for determining the company's strategies for technological development and also driving the discovery and implementation of new technologies and services, which it's interesting. And today, I'm going to talk how we at Amdaris are thinking about digital fitness. So if we can start with the next slide, please. Yes, so what you see on the screen, it's pretty much the world record for 110 meters men's hurdles achieved in 2012. And well, what that actually means and how it is related to digital fitness. So next slide. So what exactly is that? It's very simple. It's getting from a point A to point B in the fastest possible time, having hurdles along the way, having other competitors trying to achieve the same, if not better results, and running towards the lane. So how you achieve in such a high competitive sport such results? Well, you would see you just have to be fit, the analogy. But to be honest, having a proper mindset that allows you to get in that shape, focus, that's what is actually important. Similar with digital fitness, first we would like to talk about the mind aspect of it, and then get into how your system working together, what is your data, what about generative AI. Yeah, so next please. So mind, what exactly, how that applies for a business in terms of, well, for a digital business? Very simple. It's all around asking yourself some questions. So do you have a vision and a strategy? Is it aligned with your senior managers and stakeholders? Does this drive into development of a roadmap? Are you agile enough to adopt all the changes that come along the way? And does it drive the right value for your business? So it all relies around thought leadership, and those are the key business questions. So what we did in Amdaris, it's actually, we started Amdaris with the dream to deliver exceptional software for our clients. And the vision was to combine exceptional people and processes to take software development to the next level. And that's how we created eventually what we call Amdaris Way. We saw our mission in building a global brand that is synonymous with the highest technology talent and exceptional delivery. And yes, we all had to align around our core values, which is collaboration, allowing us to work seamlessly with our clients. Agile, being agile, we also seek to continuously improve, explore new technologies, and find better ways of working and meet the needs of our clients. Yeah, another our value was ambitious. It is actually ambitious. We're always striving to learn more, to deliver better, to build a reputation and grow faster and create strong and lasting partnerships. And purposeful, we are relentless in our pursuit for success. So we're focusing on goals to achieve exceptional outcomes. So how did we all apply this to build our digital body? Can we advance, please? And again, so making the analogy between a physical fit body and a digital fit body, well, data is the key metric to measure your digital fitness. It's the heart rate, if you want, and the pulse. And in Amdaris, we started our journey in creating actually an application that incorporated by design all of our values, a system that combined our exceptional talent, our projects, our clients to deliver Amdaris Way. So all this allowed us to inspect what we expect. We applied an extensive auditing platform around employees' motivation, project health indexes, net promoter scores, and technical excellence. So we could achieve a measure on our visions and values now, allowing us to identify as well the risks before they actually became problems. And we call that platform advanced. Well, that was the first hurdle we have to jump over. And then the next one was appearing over the horizon. How do we keep this airplane, Amdaris, flying while we still digitally build it? Just to remind you, we did grow last year over 90%. So the next hurdles were implementing new off-the-shelf products as we were growing and scaling all our business functions like Salesforce, HR platforms, learning management systems, recruitment platforms. We also continued developing other bespoke applications through our talent pool. And the next hurdle was now we were on top of data, but that data was everywhere. So next thing, we created a data lake, allowing us to aggregate all this data from the platforms. No, sorry, can we go back? Yes. Yes, thank you. So we defined and applied a data integration strategy, allowing us to automate most of our business processes. It allowed us to improve the collaboration between our functional areas within the business, which led to a point we had to apply some data governance practices in place. Again, a next hurdle. It's very crucial actually for businesses and organizations that rely on data, as Amdaris is, as Robert Olters is, to apply a proper data governance practice. It improves the decision making and data-driven operations in the business. So we had to apply some practices to guarantee that the data is reliable, accessible, consistent, secure. So we talk a lot about data. Let me explain exactly what we did. Now it's the next slide. Thank you. And again, so we started with one vision, single source of truth. That's the underlying principle that aims to ensure that everyone in our organization bases the decisions and actions on the same data. So applying this principle to our data lake allowed us to make more informed decisions, improve our operational efficiency, and drive better business outcomes, actually. And at that point, when we decided to look into a concept of a product on top of data, so data as a product, what exactly is that? It's actually treating data as a valuable asset that can be packaged, sold to generate revenue, for example. So we started viewing data not just a byproduct of our business operations from all our platforms, but as a standalone product that can be monetized in the future. So by treating data as a product, we did manage to unlock additional revenue streams. You'd be surprised. Improve decision-making processes and create new opportunities for our growth and innovation. And also, as part of now product mindset, as part of data lake as a product, we incorporated a business intelligence functions as well, with the primary goal to support even better decision-making. So part of that is analysis and data mining, reporting, data visualization, the interactive dashboards, and predictive analytics. So all that sounds good, but we had to think as well of our infrastructure. So do we have the right infrastructure? We had to think, what about our backup? We became more and more critical on our platforms being live and ticking all the time. So we did leverage, in this particular case, Azure platforms allowed us to easier implement all our backup and disaster recovery strategies. So having done all that, where that leaves us in regard to generative AI. So if we can progress, please, the next slide. Well, we look at the generative AI at this point in time as a AI tool set that actually helps our people become even better. It augments them. It's like steroids. Sorry for the analogy, but it does improve the productivity and the quality of work. So we are running now a program of adopting various. We are Microsoft infrastructure house, so various Microsoft generative AI products in helping us writing code, helping us in doing better quality assurance, helping us to actually predict some security threats for the software that we build. So to be honest, we have a very simple view on generative AI. So can you please progress? Generative, it's not a pilot, but when done properly, it can be an amazing copilot. It generally can give you wings. So thank you very much for your time today. I trust what I presented was insightful and useful. And let me hand back to Nigel. Thank you.
So Mihai, thank you. And I'm reliably informed that no trademarks were infringed during Mihai's presentation. So
yes, we did.
But
check
again,
that.
I think you know a fascinating insight into how a high growth company centers itself around a set of strategies where data becomes a product, and that thinking is key to driving some of the value and the insights that you get out of having data at the very, very heart of everything that you do. And you know that in of itself is difficult to achieve. Now, what I'm going to do now is first of all just remind people question and answers. Remember, there's been a couple come in. We've got a session at the end to answer more of the Q&A. So if any of you've got any questions based on what Mihai has just said, use the right-hand window to do that. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to hand over to Dominic, who's going to talk through the experience that he's had in implementing and thinking along the lines that Mihai's just discussed. So Dominic, over to you.
Thanks, Nigel. I think when Mihai asked me to, sort of present today, I think it means cramming sort of 5 years worth of activity into 10 minutes. So I think I can do it justice. And I've tried to center more on the how we got ready and we became fit rather than the what we actually delivered. It's inevitably we'll cover a bit of both because you can't talk about the how without the what, but it's very contextual, some of the things we're doing to Robert Walters. But let me introduce myself first. Dominic Dow, I'm the CTO for the Robert Walters Group. For those that don't know, Robert Walters Group, if you move the slide forward, Hazel, is a professional recruitment firm. We trade under three brands, Robert Walters, Walters People, and Resource Solutions. Can we just move the slide deck on one? That's brilliant. So Robert Walters and Walters People is our direct to business agency businesses, and Resource Solutions is our outsourcing and advisory We have two CTOs. I look predominantly after Robert Walters and Walters People and Group Functions, and I have a colleague, Rory, who looks after Resource Solutions, much more client-facing technology. But actually, I underpin, certainly from a data integration and Group Functions for Resource Solutions. Moving on to the next slide, we are operating in 31 countries, soon to be 32. Probably just important to say that that is almost without exception organic growth. So whilst it's a global organization, it's very, I think, local in feel. Many of the new country startups are where we take an existing senior member of a team and move them into that country to establish. So the DNA and the culture, as we talk about it within Robert Walters, is quite deep set. So the passion around running your own businesses is quite strong. So delivering services, adds a challenge when you're trying to very much convince people to do things or don't do things, because there's the passion and ownership within the business is really quite strong. So without wanting to sound like a life coach, I think any fitness journey starts with a mindset change, and that's the same for Robert Walters. If you take the clock back to sort of 2017, 2018, it's probably fair to say on Nigel's adoption curve, we might be considered laggards. If you move the slide forward again, this is a slide actually just taken from our standard marketing intro. I'm not going to talk about the bits on the left, but actually for the last 5 years, we've very much talked around technology as an enabler. It predates me, so I can't be explicit about what that mindset trigger was, but it's become very much more prevalent around the need for technology to be at the mainstay of our business, to the point that 5 years on, it's amplified to the point that it features in our annual reports, to our what we declare to the markets. So it's an equal component along with revenues and profit. So that allows us to then, in technology, obviously, to make a start, and I think that's always the question: where do you start? If we move on to the next slide, I think there's a competition at the end to see how many fitness cliches Dominic can load into the presentation with a prize for the closest. But it is a marathon, not a sprint. As I say, it's been 5 years for us. For those that have read Atomic Habits by James Clear, he's one of my favorites. Loads of one-liners, which I think are just so pertinent. The one that stuck out for me was that whilst even 5 years ago we had some really great goals, you can't, I think, get there until you increase the maturity and levels of your systems. And by systems, you can talk people, technology, and actual IT itself. So we very much had to start. I think, again, quoting James Clear, success is the product of daily habits, not once in a lifetime transformation. So we very much had to sort of start at what I would call foundational activities, but we never labeled them as such, and they thread through our daily lives today. First was very much making sure we built the right relationship with the business. Mihai mentioned about relationship with customers. It's no different for us as an internal function to the business. So we established a business partnering function, small in nature but giant in function, to really be the voice of technology inside the business, and importantly, the voice of the business inside technology. For those that know the sort of business partnering maturity model, certainly 5 years ago, I would have said we were very much at the bottom rung of the ladder as order takers. And now we're very much, I think, as hopefully strategic advisors. Service desks and that sort of daily, very sort of simple services that our users touch and feel every day was not well perceived, was disparate in global people. So that's been consolidated and climaxed certainly recently in Service Desk Institute accreditation, and just changing those daily things that we do for the business. Like most businesses, we did a fairly significant shift to the cloud, all but complete for us. I think there's probably 2 servers somewhere in a cupboard in London still running Windows NT, which I fear is probably why they keep me around still, because I was really good at that. So that's complete for us. There was a huge ERP transformation, certainly early sort of 2019, 20 through to the early parts of 21. We had an aging Sun system at group level, but disparate systems across the 31 countries. So a move to a single Dynamics 365 finance and operations and talent HR solution is complete. And then a load of stuff in end use, what I would call end user compute, around unified comms, SharePoint, mobile computing. And I think, like most of us, whilst we had some of it pre-COVID, I think its adoption was catapulted in the face of the pandemic, certainly by our business, which historically was, certainly for our sales functions, were very much office based. So it did us as a favor, as it did for many in technology, to drive adoption, even if we had the technology. So as I say, these were, I label them as foundational, but actually they run through even through today. Next big sort of phase, and I use the word phase lightly because it implies somehow linear, and it wasn't. I mean, this again is threaded through. If we move on the slide, you know, the other big, I think, domain for us was around, and again, it started with a question. Again, I mean, Mihai mentioned this. It started with a question for us of do we buy versus build for our core business platform. I think that's a webinar in its own right, so I won't venture too much into that. But suffice to say that we spent 2019 doing a whole market assessment of some main players as well as, you know, challenging products, and then working to look at what a build strategy would look like. We went down the build route. You know, I think with that goal of gaining competitive advantage through strategic and development decisions and integrations can only come from being in control of the product that runs your business. That was for me at the heart of the decision we made. I think in becoming fit, I think you have to always understand your own physical limitations, and that's where I think the, you know, the partnership with Amdaris comes in. We needed to buy in muscle, so cliche 34. I think to really, certainly as you're in a transitional phase, you know, your needs and your capacity to get work done is increased for a period of time, but it's not permanent. I mean, it may be for many years, but it's not forever. So we very much partner with Amdaris to deliver what we call Zenith, our core CRM and applicant tracking system. It's a multi-year program of works. You can see, you know, in real simple terms, we built the foundations to prove we weren't all smoking drugs in the early part. 2021 was a beta release for some of our less mature markets, and as of early hours of yesterday morning, we went live in our Greater China business, so China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. So we're about 50% deployed globally, with the rest to be done in 2024. And then 2025, we very much want to start to exploit the technology. That's not to say we're not doing some great things and integrations today, but I think we're still very much building what's needed by the business to replace the legacy platform. It's fair to say, I think, in terms of the partnership with Amdaris, it is, yeah, of course, it's a customer supplier commercial arrangement, but I think it's very much a partnership in the true sense of it. I think both in delivery, and I think I can speak for Mihai at an emotional level, I think in terms of all the way down between Mihai and myself, as well, all the way through our teams. I think, again, to stick with the theme, I think we can't be successful without Amdaris in this space, and vice versa. Our teams are blended, they are agile squads. So I think it very much feels like we're bench pressing while spotting for each other at the same time and in equal measure. So that's a huge, I think, main sort of work stream for us. As I say, many multi-years, it takes stamina to stay the course. And that's not to imply that in 2020 we knew what we're going to do in 2023 explicitly, but we're still on the same trajectory to build and own our core product that runs our business, so that we can differentiate in a competitive market. If we move on, then that really what that allowed us to do was take, I think, having done some of those new ways of working, and the Zenith teams are sizable in nature. We've got 7-8 agile squads, either building features and functions or migrating data. We've got components within that program that's looking at business change and the quality of the data in the systems. That allowed us, I think, to take that approach and really look to apply a more product-based approach to some of our other areas within technology. And I think if for those again know the sort of standard product life cycle, it's a typical bell curve. And I think for anything that we would consider in the growth phase or maturing phase, we have taken a product-based approach. So first of all, digital recruitment, which is the Zenith piece I mentioned. And I mean, there's a million slides and pictures you can throw around product management, but I always love this or versions of this. You need people that are religious about building the right products, what we should do, and they need to understand the business. Then we have teams that come together to build it in the right way. And that's, you know, I think for me about being product orientated and being agile, and we very much have that across our teams. I have people from a Zenith perspective that are from the business who understand what good recruitment looks like and what the system should do. And then obviously we have our teams of analysts, product owners, researchers, testers, developers, and that's where we take significant resource from Amdaris as part of blended teams to deliver it in the right way. So we've done this across digital recruitment, which, as I say, is Zenith. It's our proprietary billing platform. It's our digital CV auto formatting solution and candidate marketplace. We've done it across HR and finance, so they very much drive the future strategy around our ERP platform, but also learning management, payrolls, pre-employment screening and solutions like that. We very much, I think, to coin Mihai's phrase, one we've used for 2 years here, data as a platform, data as a product. We use both terms. We've got 3 agile squads running a backlog, working out what we do with data, and we've got product owners and product managers around data to work with the business, because there's a lot of different inputs to coordinate and balance priorities on. We do it across integrations as well as our web development, Power BI and business analytics. So we've taken this approach much more now, blended of course with project worlds, because we still have projects that need to get things delivered. But a big part of my team is looking at making sure we build the right products and then collaborate with our development teams and partners to build it in the right way. And so I think that probably leads then neatly, I suppose, into what does that do and imply to what we're doing as a business around generative AI and AI. So if we move forward on the slide deck, we, I think, probably would, again, linking back to Nigel's adoption curve, we're somewhere in that sort of upward slope somewhere. We're definitely not laggards. We're definitely not innovators. We're somewhere up in the early majority. And actually, I'll do a bit right to left here. So actually, we've always had an innovation team where some of our really great work's been done to demonstrate whether we should be using solutions, often third-party or bought solutions, but do it in a quick trial live with the business, work out whether it's got value and then deliver it. More recently, they've moved into very much looking at what we do and should be doing with AI. I think like most businesses, certainly at the back end of last year, all our CEOs were knocking on our door saying, what are we doing with AI? What are we doing with ChatGPT? Because certainly they were led to believe with their industry peers and competitors that they were stomping a march ahead. I don't think they were, but that's the narrative. So our innovation team's very much leading the way. We now have established our own Robert Walters AI playground. So we've enabled OpenAI within our Azure tenant. We have a playground for us to both experiment, but also to do some real life use cases with the business. We have a Trailblazer group that the innovation team manage. That's about 350 people from across the business that are allowed to use that playground to try, because they believe and we believe that the good innovations about what to do with it will come from the business, not from the technologists delivering the business. So we're doing some things around CV transcribing interviews into meaningful data into our system. Job ad writing is something, we don't publish half of the jobs we get because of time and effort, and actually if we can automate that and do some of that. So there's some real use cases that the team are driving forward, but working with that Trailblazer group to very much experiment with what we're doing. So again, this is small in nature, but significant, and it allows us to really understand what we as a business should be doing with AI. As I say, that's the how. The what, I think, is still early and will shape in the months and years ahead. But as I say, I wanted to just sort of give in 10 minutes a flavour of what we've done in Robert Walters, about how we've got ready, and as I say, to I suppose summarise, it's about being product orientated, making sure we understand what the business needs, and having a way of working that is scalable with partnerships in place. So I'll hand back to Nigel.
So Dominic, thank you. Really quite a compelling story of a journey, as these things always are, cliched or not. About moving from realization at the business level that things had to change, the definition and execution of a plan, a world-class team that was able to sort of help the business grow and expand whilst keeping the airplane in the air. Mihai, to borrow your analogy from earlier. And I think when we get to the questions, and there's a couple that have popped in here, one of which is really resonating with me, and I'll ask you it shortly, is that element of tying it all together in a compelling and compactful story. So Dominic, thank you so much for that. Now, we have a few questions, so we're going to get to the Q&A section first in a couple of minutes. But first of all, I need to sort of make a point here that, look, a lot of the work that Dominic did in conjunction with Amdaris has led to the creation, if you will, of a digital health check that Amdaris offer as a service. So ability for organizations to contact the Amdaris team and to have people like Mihai or people in Mihai's team come into your organization and look at, where you are on a journey not dissimilar to what Dominic has described, but to focus particularly on certainly the software development side, how you build blended teams, how you move to agile, how you actually manage that software development process in a super smooth and highly productive way. And if you look down the left-hand side of the screen here, some of the things that the Amdaris team can help you and your leadership uncover could be useful in actually, one, assessing your own level of digital fitness, and two, thinking about how you do become fitter. Is it a mindset issue? Is it a body issue? The analogies that Mihai has drawn, where does that fit within your organization? And if we can sort of pause now just for sort of 30, 45 seconds, a poll is going to come onto your screens. And if you could just interact with that, I'm going to pause the conversation for about 30, 45 seconds, and then we'll get live into the Q&A. Okay, so since the poll was relatively straightforward, a yes or no answer, I think it's probably safe to move on. And in the remainder of the time that we've got, let's move into the Q&A section. So if we can take the poll off the screen. So in listening to you, Dominic, and the first question is actually coming to you because it's I said it resonated pretty strongly with me and some experiences I've had. And this is from a chap called Joe. So Dominic, first one to you. How did you measure the success of this digital evolution journey that you went on? And how do you share the results in an organization that spans multiple geographies, multiple countries? Could you just sort of think about, what it was that you did to sort of get stakeholders on board?
Yeah, for sure. How to do that justice again in the time. So I think, as always, it's multi-leveled. I think right at the early start, I think old school it might be, but having clear governance structures in place, and certainly, although we talk about agile and Scrum and all those things, actually, when you're running big programs that impact the business, you still need that traditional governance of steering committees with the right people, with and I think getting the execs in the trench and be accountable for the decisions you're making. Our job then is to translate those decisions that are made and deliver it out to the wider business. And actually, that's a bit of a two-way dialogue, because actually the execs sometimes say, what's the business saying? Because of course they're dealing at macro level, and the business is closer to the shop floor. So then actually we built a mechanism, what we call working groups. So the strapline for our Zenith program very much is built by the business for the business. And so actually, whilst we've included ex-consultants in our team, and I think that in itself is part of that strategy to say, well, it's not just technology building technology for the business, it's the business deciding what we do, the priorities, what it should do. But actually we work with a community of probably 250 consultants across the globe to make sure that actually we get that input. When you're actually designing this, even down to the level of designing the screens, A/B testing, we do an element of that to make sure that actually we can make sure we're making the right decisions, because that's the one fundamental difference about building your own platform, is that you're in control, right. And you're not on a roadmap. So that's a huge part of it. The business change, I'm a massive advocate from our business change team that operates part of our Zenith program, certainly champion that cause to make sure that we're communicating consistently, effectively, managing stakeholders, but making sure actually we channel that and publicize it. And big part of that publicity is about the message. Certainly for us, it's a long game, so it will be perfect in the end, but there are some compromises to make along the way. And I think getting people on board with that strategy has been huge, because that means you're not having to deal with, we want this feature, we want that feature, it's not doing this. They know, and actually our business leaders know and support that at a country level, that it's about doing, and we don't tend to use the word MVP in the business because it's misconstrued, but actually having an MVP that is, can we run the business on it? Yes. Does it do everything that we want it to? No, but that can be down the line. And certainly when you look at, as I say, on that agenda of 5-year plan, once we got the global deployment, that's when you're exploiting the technology. Whatever the business wants as the most important next thing, we have the ability to pivot and do it. That to me is the fundamental, and people are still on board with that strategy. That's what they bought into, I think. And certainly when I've traveled around our business, you can see there's a different level of commitment of the businesses and the business users, because it's our system, not a system that we've implemented on them.
Yeah, and there's a sense of personal and professional pride often in managing and running these programs, right? And if you've got the organization and you use whatever measurement tactics you use, but if the organization is genuinely excited by the process of change, it actually builds a momentum. And once you've got that momentum, in a way, it's actually kind of hard to stop. But I think there's a balance in not going too far too fast. And I think the idea that you let a limited number of employees work in an AI sandbox that you have defined, let the innovation come from them. They know their business arguably better than you do in terms of what they do in a local market. So the fact that you can do that is super impactful, I think.
Yeah, and we started to talk more about horizons 1, 2, and 3. 1 is the thing we're doing now in the next 12 months. Horizon 2 is about the things we know we want to do. The order and the specifics will become clear. The AI stuff is very much in Horizon 3. Therefore, we're not really worried about integrating it into our industrial systems. But it'll be, to your point, Nigel, it'll be where the ideas come from. And the good ones will then slowly make their way forward into Horizon 2 and then into Horizon 1, and then we'll get them done. So that's the language we're now talking about, because it allows, I think, the business to understand that there are some things we're doing, but we're not going to industrialize much of what we're doing about AI in a grand scheme, but will be some point solutions to add value to the business. The real magic, I think, comes is when you can deliver it out globally through our Zenith platform, in an industrial fashion. So yeah, that's the language we're using more, because it helps, I think, people understand that, as always, we can do everything technically, but we just can't do it all at once.
Everything everywhere all at once, right? That was my strap line from earlier. Okay, Dominic, thank you. So Mihai, I've got one for you here. This has come from a lady called Laura, who's basically saying, look, have we got any practical tips for creating a digitally fit mindset within a company, knowing that there are a number of variables that you're going to have to work with? So, if you think about that, how would you sort of apply that thinking to creating a digitally fit mindset?
Okay, I will relate to the journey that Dominic just, my answer alongside that journey. Well, not quite involved, but I'm quite aware of the challenges and the journey that Robert Walters is going through the digital evolution, let's call it like that, through Zenith and outside of Zenith as well. And at the mindset level, there are actually one simple rule. I have a scientific background, so we call it Pareto rule, which is, how can you get 80% of the value applying just 20% of the effort? And when that becomes part of a small worm in the back of your brain that always asks this question, when you want to make the next step, when you see the next hurdle, now back to my presentation, it's, how do I get the most value with the least amount of effort? So where are my low-hanging fruits? And then we get to a point which a second thought is always there. Why? How about if there are no low-hanging fruits? We have just elephants in the room, very big, and the question is, how do you eat an elephant? Actually, this is a cliche, but you eat it
one slice at a time. Yeah,
exactly. And then when you think how to slice that elephant, apply the first rule. So what slice is going to get me the 80% of the value with the 20% of the effort done? Applying this mindset, and trust me, there are practices and how can you evolve or digitally transform a very big system into something which is more modern and a plethora of systems around itself. And we did apply different tactics on how you get there, but where do I put the least amount of effort to maximize the value for my business? That's pretty much what has to be in the back of every CTO, to be honest.
I agree, right? And I think there's a question that's literally just come in, and Dominic, it's for you, but I think it picks up on what you've just been talking about, Mihai. So the one is, how do you get people into the mindset? So the low-hanging fruits, quick wins. And Dominic, let me expand on that by saying, look, if you had 2 or 3 key learnings from the implementation to date, what would you say you've learned most from implementing a project like this so that it tees up Gen AI to be introduced into your business?
So I mean, I think there's a few things that probably spring straight to mind. I think certainly, I think it is about, and again, it's not a particularly complex answer. I think achieving it is maybe more difficult. It's a little quoting from the Agile, manifesto slightly in the fact that actually a team focused on a clear goal, empowered, is going to be way more successful than being told. So I think building the right teams and the team cultures and the accountabilities and you mentioned passion. Certainly the people that lead on the products for me are just desperately passionate about what they do, and that just percolates everywhere from that perspective. So I think there's that part of it. But I learned certainly early on, sort of 18 months ago, you've got to try and take everyone with you. Sometimes you focus on the people around you that are actually key to the success, but actually one of the big derailers are the people, because certainly as you're transitioning, I'm probably guilty of this, but you try not to be. There's no judgmental about the new stuff you're doing versus the old legacy, because the legacy you have is still running the business, and it comes from many years of organic change. But you've got to be careful, I think, not to lead a sort of two-tier environment in your team. Certainly within technology, the people that are focused on the new and the people that maintain the old. That for me was something. So actually, because it's a transitional state for us many years, at some point the people that are involved in I think we are there now. Many of the teams that were not involved in that digital evolution program in the early days are now integral. The support functions, the teams, the DevOps, service desks, business partners, all of that. Whereas in the early days, it was much more of a ring-fence program team because we didn't want to derail the business. We were still experimenting and finding our way. So I think for me, the learning was making sure you can take everyone along with you with that end game, certainly from within technology, as to what it meant, because there was for a period of fear that somehow regions of your teams or parts of your teams were somehow going to be made redundant because we're doing this digital evolution. Was never the case. Right. But I think underpinning that messaging is really important. That's one of my learnings. And I can't understate, and we've been really fortunate because it hasn't felt like hard work, but you have to have sponsorship from above in the business. Otherwise, I think you're dead in the water, and you can apply that across any domain. But we've been really fortunate with, Robert Walters was running the business still until March this year, but Toby, our new CEO, is hugely passionate about what we're doing, knows it's not an easy task, and has been behind us 100% of the way. Probably the most successful in my 25 years of the business and the technology truly working in partnership again. They trust our ability, and what we built and what we do with key partners like Amdaris, and they know that it's not easy, and they know their own limitations that the business put in the way. So that's, to me, is key. If you don't have that, it's a real slog.
Yeah, and so there's two questions left, and actually one of them's for me, so I will take that, which is outside of the organizations of the size and scale we're talking about here, I work with businesses that are a lot smaller in size than this, and one of the questions that's come across is, look, are there any techniques I've discovered for getting smaller businesses engaged in these type of transformations and not being afraid of technology? Now, some of you might have seen an absolutely fascinating article in the most recent Sunday Times, an interview with a guy called Tyler Cohen, who is a top economist in the US, and he has a blog called the Marginal Revolution blog, and he looks at this actually in a really interesting way, because his commentary is, look, never underestimate the power of inertia. And you will have come across inertia in your business, Dominic, at a scale, and even in businesses that are sort of 50 people and below, the amount of inertia in people who are resistant to change, and what you have to do to convince them to go on a journey where a technology benefit is something that they can see, this can be incredibly hard. And so for those of you who are in smaller businesses, in technology roles, Dominic's already said it, Mihai's already said it, getting the sort of senior leadership on board is pretty key, but actually getting the operational people on board and having them become a voice that amplifies your message is also key. And that can be incredibly hard because of the power of inertia, the resistance to change that I often meet, that Dominic and Mihai, you will have met either in organizations that you work with, but it's that never underestimate the power of inertia, right? I think going into this as an evangelist around the technology won't win you any friends. Small steps that prove the point, that make a demonstrative difference to the way the company runs, even if it's just a fractional marginal gain, these can be important building bricks in the wall, right? Because that wall is going to take some building in organizations where you have an entrenchment and a desire to not actually change. So if you've got access to the Sunday Times from last week, either electronically or in the paper form, brilliant interview, one of the best and most balanced I've read, because let's face it, there's a lot been written about this stuff recently, but this comes across as a particularly well-balanced argument and actually a fascinating insight into how people are thinking about Gen AI in organizations, as I said, typically at the smaller end of the scale rather than the larger. So we have a little under 10 minutes left, and so Mihai, the last question that we've got is actually for you, and it's maybe a little personal, but it allows you to tell a story, I think. So if you think about your own journey as a CTO, working in an organization like Amdaris that's gone through such a massive growth curve, what are sort of some of the ups and downs that you felt whilst actually, implementing change in an organization like Amdaris? And so this was our closing question. So over to you to sort of to answer that one.
Well, thank you, Nigel. Well, I mentioned hurdles in my presentation. Well, there are plenty of those. And to be honest, Nigel, you just hit the spot. Resistance to change and inertia, it's typical even for technological advanced companies. So although we developed our digital ecosystem as we were growing to accommodate those needs, implementation and adoption was one of the challenges. And well, one of the challenges that were successfully sorted, and I can say not only by me but the entire business, aligning our practices, our culture. Working on a culture is always the most difficult thing to do. Changing a culture sometimes sounds impossible to do. So again, another challenge was of building the right culture that represents our values. And again, I wouldn't call those personal challenges, but business challenges that I was part of the solution as well. And then, well, another challenge is personal resistance, to be honest. Unknown brings a degree of uncertainty, and to fight that, you have to sometimes fight with yourself. To be honest, I think this was my greatest challenge, still is. Next level. We were recently acquired by Insight like 2 months ago. A huge space of uncertainty, and setting yourself in the new mindset where you remove the resistance. That's something I'm not struggling anymore, but it was a challenge of unknown. The more you get to know, the better the world looks like, but getting over that hump. So it's all in people's mind, to be honest, because everything else, we have experience of developing software, of building products, of applying digital strategies, and for that now that is known to us, and that's how we can help somebody who has that unknown, but we have our own unknowns. I hope I'm making sense, because it sounds a little bit too philosophical, but the biggest obstacle, to be honest, is myself, and getting myself over that, it's a constant challenge.
People and culture define businesses, right? I think what we've heard, both in the formal presentation in terms of thinking about this in terms of a mindset and getting yourself physically in shape. And then Dominic, your piece around, okay, this is a journey, this is where we started, these were the very clear goals, and the fact that those goals broadly haven't changed over a 5-year period, suggests that one, you got the initial thinking right, and two, that the business has come along with you as you've implemented it because they've seen the benefits of change. And many of us on this webinar will have been in organizations where that isn't true. So it's actually very nice to hear a story that, with the right people, with the right mindset, getting themselves digitally fit is something that gets you ready for the next wave of evolution. And, people will have different views of AI on this particular call, but it's here, it's not going away. And the ability to embrace it in the right way, to use it to augment capabilities that you have in your existing teams is where the current thinking is. And I think over the course of the next sort of 12 to 18 months, if you think about what Microsoft is doing with Copilot, the way it will actually augment that capability, that's pretty much, Dom, to use your language, kind of Horizon 1 type stuff, right? That's where we think this is headed, given some of the changes that are coming in the application suites that we use every day. So look, on that note, we are 5 minutes away from the top of the hour. To everybody who's joined us this morning, thank you so much. Dominic and Mihai, again, thank you for your insight, for the really compelling presentations and the work, and thanks to all of you for the questions that have just sort of maybe dug a little bit deeper under the skin as to, you know, what this actually meant and how people actually did this, right? Again, as a reminder, the presentation material will be made available to you. If there are any things that spring to your mind post this webinar, ask@amdaris.com is your best friend, and the team at Amdaris will be there to be able to sort of engage with you and help you ask any questions that perhaps have formulated in your minds once this webinar has finished. But again, for now, Dominic, thank you so much. Mihai, thank you so much. It's been great fun to host and MC this. And on that note, as we exit the